August 19th, 1942. The beaches of Dieppe, France. 3 Churchill tanks named Boar, Beetle and Bull rolled toward the shore carrying a strange new weapon. A flamethrower bolted onto a tank. The British called this improvised creation the Churchill OK, after Major J.M. OK, who dreamed it up. Bull never made it to land. The tank rolled off its landing craft too early and drowned in 10 feet of water, 100 yards from shore. Boar smashed its fuel tank on a rough landing and lost its fire-breathing capability before seeing any action. Beetle broke a track pin the moment it hit the beach and became an expensive pillbox. All 3 were lost. The Dieppe raid was a catastrophe. Over half the attacking force became casualties. And yet, someone in British High Command looked at this mess and said, "The flamethrower tank? That part actually worked. We should build a better one." 19 months later, on D-Day, a new generation of fire-breathing tanks crawled onto the beaches of Normandy, the Churchill Crocodile. And this time, they worked so well that German officers would call them something specific, un-British. So today, let me tell you about the tank that caused 5,000 German soldiers to surrender in Normandy alone, scared the Wehrmacht so badly that they executed captured crews on sight, and eventually helped burn down one of history's most horrific concentration camps. This is the story of a dragon that drove on tank treads. The British had been strapping flamethrowers onto various vehicles since the war started. Universal carriers, Valentine tanks, unarmored trucks, which is exactly as suicidal as it sounds. The problem was always the same. How do you get close enough to spray fire on enemy positions without getting killed in the process? A guy on foot with a flamethrower could manage maybe 37 meters of range and 10 seconds of fuel before he ran dry, and he had no armor. Infantry with flamethrowers had the life expectancy of a lit match in a rainstorm. Tank flamethrowers solved the armor problem, but early designs sacrificed the main gun to fit the flame equipment. So you had all this protection, but nothing to fight with once your fuel ran out. Major General Percy Hobart saw a demonstration of a prototype Churchill flamethrower in 1943 and apparently thought, why does it have to be either or? Keep the gun, keep the flamethrower, just figure out where to put all the fuel. The answer was a trailer. A big, armored, 6.5-ton trailer towed behind the tank, carrying 400 gallons of fuel and 5 cylinders of compressed nitrogen to push that fuel through the system. Connect the trailer to the tank with an armored pipe running along the belly, feed it into a projector where the whole machine gun used to sit, and suddenly you've got a 40-ton tank that breathes fire and still has a 75mm gun in the turret. 80 seconds of continuous flame, split into 1-second bursts. Range of about 120 yards, though some sources claim 150 under ideal conditions. For comparison, the portable flamethrower British infantry carried got you 10 seconds of fuel and 37 meters. The Crocodile gave you 8 times the duration and 3 times the range, fired from inside several inches of armor plate, with a real tank gun for backup. And the trailer could be jettisoned if it got hit, if it ran empty, if you needed to move faster. You pulled a release inside the tank and drove away. Crews could collect the trailers after the battle with a tow bar, though refueling took 90 minutes of manual labor, usually pouring fuel from 45-gallon drums, so nobody was eager to abandon their supply. The base vehicle was the Churchill Mark 7. This matters because the Churchill was already famous for 2 things: incredibly thick armor, up to 152mm on the front hull, and an ability to climb terrain that would stall other tanks. The Churchill could crawl over obstacles, up steep grades, through the dense hedgerow country of Normandy that gave American forces so much trouble. Put a flamethrower on a tank that can go anywhere and shrug off most anti-tank weapons? Now you've got something special. The first Crocodiles hit the Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944. 13 and 15 troops of C Squadron, 141st Regiment Royal Armoured Corps, landed at La Rivière and Le Hamel. The flamethrowers weren't used on D-Day itself. Conditions were too chaotic. But on June 7th, 13 Troop lit up German defensive positions for the first time. 150 enemy troops walked out under a white flag. That set the pattern for what came next. The Crocodile's greatest weapon wasn't fire, it was fear. Think about it from the German perspective. You're in a concrete bunker, trained to hold your position against infantry assaults. You've got machine guns, you've got cover, you've got ammunition. Then this massive tank rolls up to 100 yards away and you watch a jet of liquid fire arc toward you, burning everything it touches. The fire doesn't go out. It sticks to surfaces. It pours through gaps in your fortifications. It burns on water. And the tank still has its main gun. If you try to run, it shoots you with high explosives. If you stay, it cooks you alive. Over 31 engagements in Normandy, crocodiles killed 154 men with direct flame. But they caused over 5,000 to surrender. A 33-to-1 ratio of surrenders to kills. German soldiers learned to recognize the trailer and would give up the moment they saw one coming. British commanders figured out a technique that was brutally effective. Crocodiles would drive up within visible range of a defended village and fire a demonstration burst. Just one. Then infantry would advance alongside the tank. By the time they reached the village, the Germans had already surrendered. No shots fired. No casualties on either side. German officers called this un-British. I think they meant it as an insult. The British took it as a compliment. The crocodile's combat record is a list of places where fortifications used to exist. Normandy bocage, the hedgerow country that turned tank warfare into a nightmare. The crocodile could burn paths through vegetation and flush defenders out of positions that would have cost infantry squads to take by conventional assault. Hertogenbosch in October 1944, where C Squadron supported the 53rd Welsh Division. The Battle of Brest, where the Americans discovered they wanted these tanks after all. The US Army had initially declined Hobart's funnies. American commanders thought specialized vehicles were unnecessary complications. Then they spent weeks fighting through fortified positions at enormous cost and changed their minds. The British provided crocodile conversion kits for Sherman tanks, and American Sherman crocodiles saw action during Operation Grenade in February 1945. When used with Churchill AVRs, the crocodiles were especially devastating against concrete bunkers. The AVRE carried a massive spigot mortar called the petard that could blow holes in reinforced concrete. Crocodiles would move in behind them and spray burning fuel through the cracks. The liquid seeped into spaces the blast had opened, igniting everything inside. There was no defense against this tactic, except surrender or death. The Germans knew what they were dealing with. Enemy units learned to recognize crocodiles by their trailers and would prioritize destroying them, the same way they hunted Sherman Fireflies for their 17-pounder guns. And they took revenge when they could. Captured crocodile crews were often summarily executed, the same treatment given to snipers. If you operated one of these tanks and got captured, your odds of surviving to a prison camp were not good. The fear cut both ways. The British considered the crocodile's technology so sensitive that they would go to extreme lengths to prevent capture. If a tank was disabled and couldn't be recovered, standing orders called for its destruction by any means available, including airstrikes. Better to call in bombers on your own equipment than let the Germans examine the fuel mixture and flame projector design. The fuel itself was classified. Crews didn't know exactly what they were carrying. It was an incendiary mixture called Fuel K, later redesignated FTF Heavy No. 1. The thickened fuel had better range and stuck to targets rather than splashing off. Beyond that, the men who operated the system were kept in the dark about its chemistry. After the war ended in Europe, the crocodile had one more job to do. When British forces liberated Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in April 1945, they found 60,000 prisoners surrounded by approximately 10,000 unburied corpses. Typhus had swept through the camp. Lice infested every structure. Medical officers declared the entire site a biohazard. Survivors were relocated to a nearby former Panzer training camp, and the barracks where so many had suffered and died had to be destroyed. Crocodiles and flamethrower-equipped universal carriers burned Bergen-Belsen to the ground, hut by hut, building by building, until nothing remained except ash and earth. There's film footage of this. British cameramen documented the systematic destruction. You can watch a Churchill Crocodile, built to terrify German soldiers into surrender, methodically incinerating the infrastructure of Nazi atrocity. It's one of the stranger endings any weapon has ever had. After 1945, most crocodiles went into storage. The war was over. Nobody needed flamethrower tanks anymore, except they sort of did. A contingent of 250 had been earmarked for operations against Japan, but the atomic bombs made that unnecessary. Some crocodiles stayed in service and deployed to Korea in 1950, though by then their flamethrowers were usually removed. They served as regular gun tanks with the 7th Royal Tank Regiment until 1951, when the last of them finally retired. The rest of Hobart's funnies were replaced by purpose-built designs like the Centurion AVRE. Modern armies kept developing flamethrower vehicles through the Cold War, but nothing quite matched the combination of the Crocodile. Heavy armor, excellent mobility, a real tank gun, and enough flame fuel to last 80 seconds in sustained bursts. A handful of surviving crocodiles sit in museums now. The Muckleburgh collection in Norfolk has one. There's one at the D-Day Museum in Portsmouth, another at the Bovington Tank Museum. A Mark 8 version lives at the Royal Australian Armoured Corps Museum. You can find one in Calgary, one in Russia at Kubinka, and there's one outside the Bayeux Museum of the Battle of Normandy, missing its trailer but otherwise intact. 80 years of sitting on plinths has quenched their fires, but the records remain. 154 dead from direct flame, 5,000 surrendered, an entire concentration camp burned to sterilize the ground. The Churchill Crocodile was built because some British officers looked at a disaster and found one thing worth saving. They took a failed prototype from a catastrophic raid and turned it into one of the most psychologically effective weapons of the Second World War. German officers called it un-British. I think they were wrong. What could be more British than taking something that didn't work, rebuilding it properly, and then using it to convince your enemies to give up without a fight? That's not cruelty. That's efficiency. The dragon that drove on tank treads. The flame that caused 5,000 men to walk out under white flags. The weapon so feared that its crews were murdered if captured. So secret that the British bombed their own tanks rather than let them be studied. The Churchill Crocodile remains one of the most effective terror weapons any army has ever fielded in conventional warfare. And somewhere in a warehouse in England, the blueprints for converting a Churchill Mark 7 into a fire-breathing monster are probably still marked classified. Some technologies, even 80 years later, remain uncomfortable to discuss in detail. I respect that.